Hi, welcome to XReality Podcast. I'm the host, Dominic Wu, and beside me is the guest, Eric Oldrin. Hi, Eric. Could you share a bit about your background with us?
Yeah, Dominique, thank you so much for having me, and I'd be happy to share about my background and excited to chat with you today. Um, I come from a creative technology background, and it started out really in the filmmaking space, looking at interactive stories. And I mean, I grew up really watching television a lot, old shows like Happy Days and Laverne and Shirley and Knight Rider, things like that. Quantum Leap is a good remake of that right now. And then after that, I started working in this space that was really trying to tell stories, but doing those in interactive kind of ways. And so I worked with Macromedia, if you remember back in the day. And we were telling stories with Flash, which was essentially non-linear kind of animated series. And so I did a bunch of stuff there for a while, worked with all sorts of really interesting people. We had sort of emerging artists that were doing some really fun stuff. And then there was some traditional filmmakers, so I got to work with Tim Burton and Matt and Trey and David Lynch and all these directors and think about how they could take their stories and make them more immersive. And so that's really where I started out, trying to think about this intersection. And that evolved into all sorts of other ways of telling immersive, interactive type stories, doing ARGs and things that were like both the analog and digital kind of space, continuing with Flash, but as we introduced video and moving beyond animation. So that's kind of my background. I kind of started out there and then started working with different studios, and applying that mostly to film properties, and then working with agencies and thinking about how that might help brands as well. And then I spent about 10 years at Facebook, and my role there was really similar. It was to look at different emerging platform spaces and really trying to explore the creative potential of these new products, and working with creators and brands and agencies to think about what they could do in those spaces. So I started with Instagram and then moved over to Messenger and doing things that were basically conversational AI in the early days there before LLMs, or at least before GPTs. And then I moved over to the Reality Labs team where we were thinking about AR and VR and things like that. And then generative AI started to emerge within that team as well. So that was my background, and then that led me to what I'm doing here today.
Wow, very interesting. Yeah. May I ask you, what do you see, for example, you work for Meta for, you mentioned 10 years, right? And Meta has been very different since the beginning. Start with Facebook, Instagram, before it was more social, right? Social platform. And later on, Mark Zuckerberg acquired Meta Quest, and it becomes Metaverse, right? And your background start from film to, a social platform and to Metaverse. So, and now becomes more like a film, right? And integrate using AI. And may I ask you, what do you see these types of training, and also in the high level, what do you see this? I mean the technology, right? Because if you see film is telling a good story, right? So, when you connect with people, you also need to tell a good story. So what do you see these types of your background and to what you are working on right now? What's this path will go? For example, storytelling. Yeah.
Yeah, I think for me, there has been that consistent path from the beginning and through till now. I think you mentioned, Facebook, Meta, their evolution also had a common thread through it. Even as they moved into the metaverse and now into AI, it's really always been about people and signals from people, understanding essentially what people care about
mm,
And then the best way to look at that is they're trying to connect people together and bring the world together around what we share. And
mm,
there's great stories around that,
mm,
people finding really rare diseases in Facebook groups and sort of banding together to find a cure, or at least to create treatment.
mm,
And then there's other sort of more insidious versions of that where we sort of understand what people's motivations are and do all sorts of other things. And so that's sort of always been the thread, even when they've sort of tried to embody that with the
mm,
metaverse, through VR or XR, and now as they're thinking about sort of essentially taking people's signals to
mm,
manifest some AI generated version of a social sort of experience that you might have.
mm,
So that's them, and I think that's the common thread for them, is how they can basically connect people about what they care about. Um, and then from my end, it's really been more about story, uh,
mm,
and about sort of how you can make someone feel something, or help someone feel something, or inspire them to feel something. Um, and I started out playing these games that allowed you to kind of be part of the story, but also observe it, sort of in
mm.
between a film and a game.
Oh,
It's first person narrative type stuff like King's Quest and Space Quest, and
mm,
and so that kind of set the foundation for me to always want to be fascinated by that.
mm,
Um, and in some ways, I think I've been kind of a hack. I'm not necessarily as good as some of these amazing filmmakers. I'm
mm,
Robert Rodriguez, or folks who have sort of really told feature length films, but I've kind of come into it from this other place where I've said, okay, well, the opportunity for me is to combine technology and creativity, and to try to figure out like what kind of stuff you can tell there.
mm,
And so that has been the thread for me, whether it's sort of nonlinear flash narratives, or trying to make something in the real world, move and then connect back to something sort of on in the digital world. That intersection is really crazy to me. I love to see that kind of thing, or things in a headset or on a phone, and that as well. And so right now, that's really what I'm focused on as well, is really just trying to tell stories in new ways, whether it is with XR and wearables and VR, or AR, or if it's with sort of generative AI, or the intersection kind of those two things together.
yeah, that's very interesting. So I remember when I first tried 360 film, right? I was sitting or standing on the street. That was the very first kind of initial like a 360 film experience. I was standing or sitting on the street. It's kind of putting you in the perspective of a black person. So I just like go around, and I was in, I don't know whether you remember or not, it was early experience in MetaQuest store. And I saw that I was surrounded in kind of like the old diner space. And then I look out and there's car moving around. It was like a very like a old way, or like a very early stage of 360 film. Then it puts me into a very interesting spot that, yeah, I can see anywhere, right? Remember that for film, it's more like you see exactly what the director want you to see. So, for example, it's cropping on the 2D screen. And right now it becomes 360, right? And same as game. Game, sometimes you just going all over the place because it's so immersive, and you can see whatever you want. And how can the director uh, make the story still happening without the user go astray? How can you tell a good story like for example, you mentioned like in 360 or in games that has less control compared with the 2D screen of a film? Yeah.
Well, that's a big creative question that you're asking there. And I remember the film that you're talking about. I was just trying to Google it and remember because that was a while, but I remember at the same time there was Cross the Line, which was another really interesting, like these films that essentially put you into someone's shoes
Hmm.
and created a sense of empathy.
Hmm.
That's one of the biggest superpowers of immersive experiences that I think a lot of people have really just really been drawn to, is this powerful transportation into the story, because you're in it, you're surrounded by it. It's absolutely phenomenal. I'm going to go, I think it's in a week or two, I'm going to go see this 360 film here nearby. It's like in a planetarium, and it's bringing Alan Watts's old recordings together. Like I love going to stuff like that. And I think, to answer your question about how you can bring someone into that story and do it in a way that leads them
Yeah.
to important parts,
Yeah.
I think that's a creative kind of question. There's all sorts of different ways that people have tried to do that. One way is to just literally put it a little bit on rails so that you kind of move the person thread through it. And, that's one way. Another way is to use really interesting aspects of the film that draw their attention or pull them through. Other ways is to reward it, through gamification. I think primarily people do that first. The first one is that there's a director and you're trying to tell a story. And so you're sort of guiding someone through the story. And although they can look around and have a little bit of agency as they go through the experience, primarily they're also kind of like pointed in a direction, because that's what the story that needs to be told looks like. But if your creative decision is that you're building more of an open world, then the whole question of the narrative is different, right? You don't have one thread. Instead, you're creating the circumstance, you're creating the environment that someone's going to go into. And in that environment, it's a little bit more like Grand Theft Auto. You're going to go wander around. And,
yes.
there's going to be stuff that you experience around that story. And so that's really interesting. Like, what can that look like? And how much agency and how much of a author's voice is kind of woven into that as well. And then I think there's really interesting ways with what's happening now, like new forms of technology that can be layered, sort of into both of those scenarios, where you use, for example, a sense of someone's attention. Are you paying attention to the sunset, or paying attention to, that red car across the street, and sort of what does that mean? And then how does that then generate the next part of the story or the world that you see? It used to be really hard to do that, because we would have to literally build the assets for all these branching narratives, right? So if you make an open world, I have to have 187 or 187,000 different scenarios already mapped out and created. But now with generative AI, right, you can do things exponentially differently, and that's the mind sort of blowing opportunity for folks. There's some things happening, like if you've heard of Odyssey before, some of the co-founders from Pixar are making this thing where they're trying to do generative video that's happening sort of in real time in front of your face. There's a lot of other examples like that too. There's open worlds that you can kind of go into and explore, and they're literally being generated sort of on the fly in real time, using essentially a diffusion model to represent what you're seeing.
Wow, this is very interesting. So, I remember I saw Google recently released like a VEO3, right? Or like I forgot the model name, but you just get into kind of like a generative environment, and you can move around, and it keeps generate unlimited generate. I remember, 'cause right now I couldn't find that page. They probably changed it. So there were like a couple of, like a move forward, left, right. And it's just like a Gen AI, but it's like a skybox, but unlimited. And it understands the world that it generates. So you can move around. For example, one of the example is that you are in the kind of like a farmer's market on the street. And at the beginning, it's just like, 2D movies, but you can move inside that market. And the more you move, and it seems like the road will generate, the vendor will generate, the things will keep unfolding according to where you move. So what do you see these types of like a, just like you said that from film to game? It seems like it's merging, right? What do you see these types of technology and kind of in the blurry between the game and film?
I mean, that's, you just described it. You know, that what I was, that's sort of what I was hinting toward before, is these sort of models that are essentially a 3D environment that's being generated.
Yeah.
You know, so there's places that are doing that you described. It's not just Google, but there's all sorts of um, other teams that are trying to explore what that looks like. You know, there's, you know, like World Labs, for example, is trying to do some stuff in that kind of space. I've seen some other sort of like, you can take a 2D model and you can essentially, you know, bring it into this platform, and they'll translate that into a 3D model that you can then like do what you said and go in, and you're walking around in a 3D world. So I think you're going to very quickly see the applications of, you know, these tools that allow you to dynamically generate 3D worlds. You'll see that applied to gaming, you know, very, very quickly, or you already are seeing different sort of versions of what that might look like. I think the other half of the coin, though, is like why, and you know what, like a lot of these tools are sort of available for creative people or technology people to use those tools and either tell stories or make games or experiences. But they all kind of still require a point of view. You know, you need to have a vision for what your experience will be like, and then sort of, you know, paint that picture using these tools. And so there's a lot of talk about the tools and not a lot of talk about the talent.
Oh, interesting. So I think maybe because the tool comes up still pretty early stage, so the talent still experiment, not quite producing something that is like a big hit, right? The killing AI film, not yet. But I think I saw like a couple of early stage people start using VFX and using AI, right? I remember there's a studio, I forgot the name, but they are very good in using AI and using green screen and to do a lot of VFX. Do you see these types of effects because it's using AI counted as AI film? Or you think AI film supposed to be text prompt to video? What do you see? It's very interesting because AI film, we start thinking about, oh, you need to do text prompt and, you know, AI generate like some 2D images. But if you see, for example, like before you said that 2D image put into 3D space and it will automatically turn to 3D, does that count AI film? What's the definition you would give for AI film?
Well, there's a lot of confusion around what an AI film is because of that. There's there's a lot of people watching what's happening, and they assume that an AI film is created by typing in a prompt, hitting enter, and then the whole thing is rendered. And so that's not true. The amount of work involved in trying to get to not just a good story, but also a beautiful, consistent, you know, an enjoyable film that has a sort of a vision that's sort of protected through the whole thing is hard to do. But then also a lot of people now that are creating AI films are sort of, they are blending traditional filmmaking with AI filmmaking. And so those are two different types of productions. One where you're just using AI tools is it's going to look and be a different type of output or expression than one where you're using a blended approach of different tools. And then one where you're not using any AI, right? Obviously, that's all going to be different. So in the middle, the people that are using blended things, they may literally have one scene that's AI and one scene that's two actors sort of talking,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
And so a lot of the stuff you see from Promise
Mm,
is actually not AI. It's like both together. And, a lot of the things that studio has produced has had, they're a hybrid filmmaking
mm,
studio, which very well may be, in a lot of ways, seems like that's what makes sense because
mm,
AI is a tool.
mm,
Or it is just like if you used After Effects or if you used Houdini or like any other kind or Unity
mm,
within your production process,
mm.
you should use what the best tool available for the
Yeah.
story needs to be. And so,
Mm,
when you create a film, a lot of what we're seeing that sort of people are very excited about is really a hybrid model where they've either shot something in live action and then they've, of course, gone through a whole post-production process where they've sort of, they have a colorist put everything across the whole film to make it consistent. They sort of bring in a lot of traditional talent, or they do something on a green screen, like you said,
mm,
like that. They might take that approach. And so there's a lot of tools available for creatives to tell a story. And
mm,
they're, um, you know, I guess my but my philosophy is like, don't let anybody tell you how to express yourself.
mm.
I mean, why, like an artist
Yeah.
should use whatever they can, whatever they need to do in order to make stuff. Me, I don't have the resources or ability to, not the ability, I don't have the resources to go and like lock down a shoot for a week and do a two people in a cafe. So
Mm,
a lot of folks need to stick just to these AI tools, and they've really unlocked the opportunity for a lot of people to tell stories that they never could have told before.
mm,
And so, they allow you to do that. When it comes to my, sort of personal storytelling, if
mm,
I'm working with a brand, then I'd be happy to bring in a hybrid approach between whatever is necessary where we have the budget available to do that.
mm,
And so, yeah, you'll see a lot of these different approaches. And
mm,
a lot of people, when they say, hey, that's an AI film, it is like a wide spectrum
mm.
of different types of productions.
Yeah, yeah, very interesting. So, you think that AI film, AI is just a tool, right? And whatever you want to use, as long as you tell a good story, you just free to use all of the elements to fulfill your creation. So, for example, like I saw Netflix, a lot of news recently said that Netflix has a lot of people using, AI to start producing some high quality production. And I even saw like some titles that, oh, we use AI or something. But I think the quality is so good. I feel like it's mixed. It's like, oh, there's real people acting something, but some scenes they use some AI to mix it. It's very hard to fully AI, right? Because sometimes, you people are sick of AI right now. Before it was like, wow, it's so cool. But now, everybody start wanting to see more authentic types of storytelling. So I think it still goes back to how you mix or how you utilize this new media to express yourself, right?
Yeah. I think that's right. I think as an artist or as a storyteller or as a creative or whatever, like the way that you bring an idea to life, um, you got to do whatever it takes to be able to. One of my heroes is Robert Rodriguez, and I was just listening to him talk the other day about like his first film was done for $7,000, and he used a friend, and they just got it made, and like there was no there was no rules around like whatever it took to get a story made. You know, he wanted to try to do a feature and see if he could make that happen.
Mm,
And so when you make a film, I don't really start with people are tired of AI. I start
mm,
with like, what is the, you know, like what is going to be the best tools that I have available in order to create something.
mm,
Like what do I have to use? You know, when Nat and Trey made South Park, all they had were like pieces of paper in their kitchen on a table, and then they mounted a camera and they created a weird little VHS tape that was like Santa Claus at Christmas, and people in LA looked at it and they liked it. Like they used what they had available to them to make the film. And so I think the same is true here. AI, just like a lot of other tools that are available, are here for us to use. Then the other side is people are sick of it and all these, like that's a different conversation. That's like a conversation for people who I guess are buying the films, like whether they care, like whether their audience is allergic to, but then that comes back to the art is like your art's not going to resonate if that's your goal with certain people in different ways. I think there's a lot of limitations that you're seeing with AI around, particularly around human performance, like you said.
mm,
Uh, but I think that has a lot more to do with the very nature of what creativity kind of is about.
mm,
Like performance and human acting or human storytelling.
mm,
Like there's this debate around whether AI can, whether things creativity will all be AI or what. It's
mm,
sort of a strange conversation because by definition, like I believe art is human. Like they're literally synonyms for each other. Like that is the definition of art,
mm,
like human expression.
mm,
And so like it doesn't make sense to not have a human be part of what they're doing.
mm,
Like they are the artist. Art is artist. So it doesn't compute. I mean, I see it for things that are basically purely promotional, which are not trying to be kind of creative.
mm,
But even that, I think, kind of needs some connection to the human spirit. So
mm.
there's probably limitations to that as well.
Yeah, so I do agree with you that human needs to be in the loop at least, or it's not even in the loop. It should be human need to direct, and using AI as tool, not the other way around, right? And for example, in education area, let's say someone just wanna learn film, right? And do you think that right now for college student, do you think teachers should ban all the AI tools and force them to do the basic, like, oh, let's get a camera and start shooting something? Or you think that it can start with like a prompting? It's like because a lot of educators thinks that AI is it's a debating. There's no right or wrong exact right now, but it's a big topic in education film that if teacher hand it over to young, like people who just beginning, like let's say film school student, if they teacher hand it over AI and student just, not even think of that. I remember yesterday I listened to, I get into a talk, AI Summit, Silicon Valley. And then the kind of like the dean said that it's interesting that the teacher wants student to write a theory or an article about like the chief, the chief in like a I don't know like a 18th century chief in South Africa or something. It's supposed to be historical event, something like that. And then the student probably didn't even look at the prompt come up with, and it becomes a chef in South Africa. It's like chief becomes chef. Yeah, it's like cook, like cook something. So the entire topic was off, and it's very obviously, and the article or the assignment that student generate or submit was pretty good, but it's just off of the topic. It's probably the wrong spelling when student prompt in. So it's very obvious. It's It's probably like AI generate like a really nice like a chef types of like a assignment. So teachers start worry about, hey, you use ChatGPT and you didn't even think and look at what you come up with, right? And you just submit it. So do you see that those AI tools should be handed over for the beginner and for them to use it, or you think it should be follow the traditional way and make them like a solid in something, and later on like AI as the advanced course?
I think it depends on the assignment. You know,
Mm,
if I'm an educator and if I'm a teacher and I'm teaching a class
mm,
on sort of like life drawing,
mm,
it's a portraiture class and you're going to be painting,
mm,
or doing sketch drawings. Like you're not allowed to use a camera
mm,
like in that class, right?
mm,
Like you can't go and take a picture of someone with a camera if the assignment is to go and use your hand to draw it.
mm,
Or for example, if I'm teaching a film class
mm,
and I'm trying to teach someone the nuance around
mm,
traditional editing, and
mm,
you have to like literally shoot on a Super 8 camera and then go into like go and actually splice together your edit, you can't use, Final Cut Pro. Like,
mm,
right? It's the assignment and a context. So if the filmmaking class or whatever the assignment is one that requires the students to do tasks themselves and,
mm,
or not have that tool available to them, which is
mm,
in this case AI to do generative output or
mm,
previs or storyboarding or even script writing or whatever they're trying to do with AI, then that shouldn't be called out in the syllabus. Like, do not you're not supposed to use this the same way you're not supposed to use a camera for my drawing class. Um, so I think that's what it is. I mean, I have a couple of kids and like they can't be using ChatGPT to write their, essays,
mm.
like that doesn't make any sense because that the assignment is for them to write the essay.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, I think that's generally the answer. I think that the, you know, it puts more, I guess, more pressure on educators to be educated about what these tools are doing so that they can themselves understand where they fit into, you know, their own curriculum.
Mm, I see. So do you recommend like for example, college students or K-12, right? How like when is the time for a student to get into AI? Or you think that because we had a debate, like for example, beginner class or like critical thinking, like just like you said, like a writing, right? For example, story writing. Like when is the time to put AI in? Or like it's very interesting that educator was so worried about it's offloading students' critical thinking. But some people said that, oh, yeah, it's actually facilitate students' storytelling because, student can keep asking the chatbot and come up with a better story. It depends on your output, right? Like, oh, as a teacher, do I see output as the final assessment? Or do I see the entire process? Or, I want that student really know something. It's inside the brain, couldn't even see it. So what do you see these types of like AI integration?
Well, you mentioned story, like basically ideation and brainstorming and
Mm,
story writing.
mhm,
So that's one kind of thing.
mm,
So, and then there's also like using it as a tool to generate imagery or a song or animation, like, so
mm,
that's the other thing. So for the storytelling bit, and probably for that too, but for the storytelling bit,
mm,
as an example, um, you know, uh, I, I think the right time to end,
mm,
like when in my educational process is
mm,
probably when I'm doing that type of thing. Like I'm writing stories, I'm brainstorming, right? And then I think the way that it is put into the course is really dependent on the educator and the teacher.
mm,
And so if they have wrapped their head around what AI can do
mm,
in that exercise, for the sake of ideation, then they'll know how to fit it into their curriculum. So if I was a professor and I was teaching storytelling and narrative and
Mm.
making a course, one thing that would be very interesting is to have, I like things in threes and fives. I don't know why I make OCD. So like 3 or 5 different ways into getting to an idea. And so we're going to go for a walk on one of our days. And we're going to basically observe the world. We're going to go to a farmer's market. We're going to go to a vinyl record store. We're going to like go to the park and sit. And we'll see what kind of ideas come out of that. And then on the next day, we're going to like do a group brainstorm, and we're going to share experiences we've had in our lives and memories. And maybe we'll have some sort of guardrails like, tell me about your grandparents. Tell me about the first time you felt betrayed. Like we'll have that, and we'll see what ideas we get out of that. And then on the third day, we'll ask ChatGPT, what are 5 good ideas? And we'll discuss that.
Oh.
And so as an educator, I think our role is to expose students to possibilities and to help them understand like where the world's going, but also to understand all of it.
Wow. I think that's interesting. For example, like you have different tools in your hand. You can use any of it, but you need to still come up with your original idea and see how you utilize those. And teacher can just, maybe early stage, you can have like AI integration or you don't. It's all up to you and see what's your goals, education goals, and what you want students to get out of, like learn something out of the class, right?
Yeah, I think so. I think teaching is, in my opinion, one of the most rewarding and really, sort of not necessarily the most rewarded profession, but it's certainly rewarding and is really like
In their heart, not like financially rewarding.
sometimes. I mean, it depends what you want out of life, but I think that like it can be a really interesting sort of exercise to sort of put different possibilities in front of your students. And so, yeah, I think that AI is, like you said, a tool, and I think you just got to put it in context. That's sort of what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, wow, that's very interesting. How do you see like a AI and XR, for example, like how those two, because AI in film, right? And you can see like a game and the film start mixing together, and now XR, right? Because film is more like a, let's say, 2D screen, but you can also view in headset. And
Yeah.
XR is like a mapping the virtual world, like in 3D space. I would say at some certain point, I feel like a film, XR, and the game, 3 of them will start mushing together. And especially the lightweight Orion, right, coming out then, or Google XR, those like a smart glass, or Apple, their new glasses. I feel like a lot of things will start merging together and become a new media.
Yeah. No, I mean, I worked with the Oculus team, which turned into the Quest team. And we made many different really interesting story-driven immersive experiences. We did stuff for St. Jude Children's Research Hospital. That was a really beautiful program. We worked with 4 different agencies and created all sorts of ideas around what you could do within VR. We worked with the Paralympics and XR. We worked with all sorts of different brands. And so I have a lot of love for what we can do in an immersive environment. I say this with all due respect, but the biggest problem with VR is a headset. No one wants to wear a computer on their face. Like even I working, I'm like, it's tedious. It's unnatural. Nobody wants to do that. And so that's been the biggest problem for people working in Unity, creating amazing, beautiful games. I mean, phenomenal experiences that we've all seen, whether like Tender Claws. I mean, check those guys out, like crazy storytelling, different ways to get at ideas. but the form factor
Mm.
has been a huge, like showstopper. And
Yeah.
so now you're right. As we move toward Google XR glasses and other form factors that are, sort of on your like a glasses environment, we'll begin to see some pretty interesting opportunities. Um, as we merge those spaces, I could
Mm.
see us having um, a pair of glasses, where you can sort of just wear them and see the world in front of you. And there's
Mm.
great opportunities there with audio. I
Mm.
think audio is an incredibly appreciated, untapped
Mm.
sort of medium that people can use to tell a story or create kind of contextual experiences. But then you'll get to a layer where you are seeing AR.
Mm.
You're right. Orion sort of was a really uh, interesting sort of step toward that, where you can see real sort of objects that are essentially tracked. You're able to track, they feel very like they're connected to the world,
Mm.
and so as that gets better and better, I think we're going to start to see some really interesting uh, content experiences for people. They'll either be story driven,
Mm.
or the majority will be sort of more utilitarian.
Mm.
Like, oh, I'm watching a map,
Mm.
or I want to look at this plant. Tell me what kind of plant that is. All the stuff people think of right away.
Mm.
But I think the real opportunity is for there to be um, sort of a view of the world that is aware of the environment and uses that signal.
Mm.
The question becomes sort of like, how does that then get served to us?
Mm.
And I worry that a lot of these platforms they want to push content at us, and then
Oh.
to push this awareness at us,
Yeah.
and they want it to be personalized, not
Yeah.
contextualized,
Yeah. Right.
right?
Right.
All of them want personal experiences, but
Yes.
I don't know. We don't want that. Like,
You will be
consumers,
living in your own bubble. Yeah.
we don't want that. Consumers do not want personalized experiences as
Mm.
much as these platforms think we do. We want
Mm.
contextual experiences,
Mm.
ones that know where we are in the moment that we're at. But I don't need you to know sort of what kind of ice cream I ate a week ago. So
Oh, but that's
just,
all Facebook's idea, right? They need to know.
I'm not calling them out. I'm just saying, like, in general, a lot of tech is essentially trying to create experiences that are pushing things at us, as opposed to experiences that just sort of know beautifully what's around us and take a very subtle approach to saying sort of, oh, hey, this is a really interesting, high rated, I guess, chicken sandwich shop, and I see a little affordance around me of what that looks like.
Yeah.
So anyway, I think that, yes, we're going to see things move toward more of a wearable environment, and hopefully we'll see things that take a more subtle approach, and things that sort of are more contextually aware, so they can do some pretty interesting things.
Yeah, yeah. I think just like you said, I remember I saw there was a startup that start generate a story, and I think they are pretty successful, and it will do according to the browsing history of what you wanna be, and then they will start generate the story, and it's automation, so there's no human involved. And they start, I forgot what startup is, but they start with romantic, those like some soap opera, those types of like very short, like phone types of vertical size, like, like 5 minutes or some, short, AI generate stuff according to your browsing or your personal interests. It will start generate stuff for you. And it seems like they do pretty well. And same as what you mentioned, that I feel like if human is not in the loop, you don't really know what it will generate, and you just, especially for younger generation, right? And they just keep getting a lot of garbage, keep absorbing, and machine is learning, become smarter, and humans start, getting those types of entertainment. I think the bar becomes so low to produce somehow a storytelling. Yeah.
Things go really weird and sideways when they become so algorithmic. Like a lot of the things that we, as a, like that, a lot of the things that we talk about
Mm,
that we wish were a little better
mm.
tend to be those things that are sort of like, oh, you clicked on a coffee cup. I'm going to show you 18 coffee cups. It's
Oh
like,
yeah.
oh, like, it's sort of like, it's sort of like, you remember the little paper clip that popped up on like
Oh
Word is like, you want to do it? Like, I don't want that Clippy. The Clippy had the best of intentions. He was a fun little animated dude, but like, you know, I I think there's and all of these platforms have the best of intentions. Like they're just trying to make the experience good for
Mm,
people. Like we think you really like this stuff,
mm.
but I don't know. Maybe we need to sort of be a little more light touched around what that might be.
Yeah. So what do you see, for example, like as for all those algorithm things, right? And also you can see because today there's a very interesting article today. It's Peter Thiel. Um, um, he said that right now Gen Z is pro socialism. Why? Because they they couldn't afford a lot of things like college tuitions, all those they couldn't buy a house, they couldn't find a job, all those things. So they start pro more socialism. And I also think that maybe you see like a just like you said, the algorithm, right? Um, People tend to see what they like to see. So they start forming a lot of interesting, I would say, generation segments. And I don't know whether this is like a good or bad thing, but it just will change a lot of the social dynamic and also cultures. Yeah, according to all the algorithm to separate people into different groups. That's also it's just a side talk. Just like it reminds me of today's news. I saw that. Yeah.
Mhm. So you're saying that people are moving toward socialist tendencies because they have uh
Gen Z, more younger generation college student, they are towards more socialism. Why? Because, for example, communism is more like, oh, you see, like, oh, you don't have any property, so we can reset everything. So that article was talking about why New York mayor will won the election compared with other opponents. Why? Because he is pro. He is pretty young. He's only 34 years old.
I
Yeah.
think it's pretty dangerous to
Mm.
sort of um suggest that because someone wants universal health care that they are a communist.
Yeah, yeah.
That's
It's very
fucked
interesting.
up. And like,
Yeah.
like Peter Thiel's worth $26 billion. It's really
Mm.
easy for him to say what,
Yeah.
like what Gen Z cares about because
Yes.
they've seen too many like cat movies and memes that have been fed to him through algorithms. I mean, the real reason why the next generation is looking down into the future and wanting things to sort of be more
Yeah. Fair.
relatable to them is
Mm.
because they can't really see a pathway towards them, sort of having basic necessities. So
Yeah.
that so it's pretty scary for a lot of people, maybe. And so,
Yeah, and put the labels for people who are, like, oh, you are looking for, healthcare, right, or something, right, like or affordable housing, and put you to the socialist.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So it's I think that people start putting mark to each other and also the algorithm, right? So for example, young people's feed or news will be very different from people who are, according to different age group or different culture background. So those are just like what I just like today I just read the news and I start feeling that wow, you see this world is start dividing and probably part of it contribute to social media, right? Or some algorithm. So you start seeing when you have some certain thoughts and you will start feeling that, wow, why the entire internet has that same like-minded news start appearing. Yeah.
But so to kind of bring it back to what we're talking about, like all of these things are essentially, um, it's like a broadcast
Mm,
of different types of messages
mm,
that we're all finding in different places, whether they're,
mm,
on your phone or, sometimes on your TV still.
mm,
And it's really up to us to tune into, the right kind of show. And then it's also up to the artists to
mm,
tell the right kind of stories. And so, I think um, that's sort of what I would sort of want to lead people with, and students that are in your audience as they think about what kind of stories are they going to tell, is to, you know, I I would not start with what they think, people want to hear. I would
mm.
probably start with what they feel like they need to share,
Interesting.
like what is your story,
Mm,
and then you use whatever means necessary to tell your, I mean, within reason, whatever
mm,
whatever tools are available,
mm,
to tell your story,
mm,
and so if that includes generative AI for a piece of that,
mm,
within the right context, that makes sense. If it includes shooting two of your friends because you have a phone and you can ask another friend to let you use a coffee shop for the afternoon, like
mm,
make that happen.
mm,
Um, and if you have a friend who is really good with Unity and they can kind of bring that into a
mm,
headset or into an interactive experience, a mobile game, like do that. I think a big part of being creative is also
mm,
being a producer, and you have to be able to sort of connect the dots between relationships and talent and the world and
mm,
what the world needs to hear right now,
mm,
and then try to tell those kind of stories. And so, I think that's what helps it move things
mm.
sort of forward for all the stuff you're asking about.
Oh, yeah. So, for example, what's your advice for young graduate college student? What's your advice for them if they want to pursuing film, game, or XR? Those like I don't know how it will code in the future, but I feel like those like a multimedia storytelling path.
Well, I mean, I think there's probably more to that question. You mean advice like in terms of trying to pay their rent and find a job, or
Both. What I mean, they just graduate and they just find out, wow, the world is, I would say, it's pretty much closing on them. Why? Because you see a lot of big tech is laying off people, and it's very hard for especially creative type. And you see, like when AI starting, it starts with writing, right? And it starts with creative type, start with image generation, 3D modeling, and you see like a code right now. So I can tell you for XR field, I'm currently teaching Unity using AI to create a game. It's it's very interesting that a lot of teacher they just teach, for example, like English, or teach I don't know, history, or teach some certain subject. A lot of teachers are suffering like, oh god, students start turning in like AI generate essay, right? And before their assignment is just essay, and now it's like, oh, student didn't even need to think. And for me, it's more like, wow, it's great because before it's impossible for one person to create a game because in one semester is 18 weeks. So right now I'm teaching vibe coding, and it's possible for students within 18 weeks to come up with a fully uh, function game with storytelling by using AI generate 3D, AI generate coding, right? But you need to know how to use it. So I think everybody's goal is different. But what do you see? For example, like yesterday, I remember there was a guy, a speaker, sit next to me, and said that I bet, like right now, my daughter is in college. I bet um, the young people will use less and less AI. And I was like, it's it's probably not true because according to a few weeks ago, I joined another tech talk in San Francisco. One of the speaker event that I joined, the founder of Game Studio, she said that right now, if you are not using Cursor is a AI vibe coding tools that IDE inside your Unity area. So you just type whatever you want and you will regenerate the whole thing inside Unity for you. So she said that if you are not using Cursor, you are not coding. And I was shocked because she has 200 employees worldwide. And she said that, oh, recently we just had 2 3D modeler join and they don't know how to code, but within 1 or 2 weeks, they use Cursor and they start implementing all their 3D models directly in Unity and make them work, make the code working. So I start wondering that, wow, this is like it's a debatable question that, for example, what advice will you give to young student? For example, like right now I'm teaching vibe coding, but in my college, there's another professor whose background was CS, computer science. He's also teaching Unity, but he said no vibe coding, no AI. Everything is follow he is against the AI. He said that, oh, I don't want students to use AI at the early stage. So students, I can tell you, first student came to my class, they use AI crazily and produce great work. And later on came to his class and stopped using AI and come back to me and say, I'm not using AI anymore. And I was like, well, if you are not using AI, I remember I read another news that there were like 2 developer got fired because everybody in the team, in the startup using Cursor, right? Just for raising the productivity. And if the developer just join because they got school education, oh, you cannot use the Cursor. And then they just, join the startup and say, I'm not using any AI. And 2 of them got fired. Yeah, because, hey, you are not using the thing that your team works. How can we work with you? So what do you see these types of like a kind of weird early stage, like a young graduate? What do you suggest? Like, for example, some people might say, oh, join some hackathon, creating a lot of project, join or start your own startup. What do you suggest?
Well, that's pretty crappy. Those professors got fired. I mean, like, it's like they're just trying to adjust. But anywho, I think my advice for the scenario you're describing, like even in your, really both you and this other professor trying to build in Unity, like when you
very different, like a totally opposite. And I was like,
yeah, but they're similar. They're similar in a way that like when you use Cursor, like there's a text prompt, right? You got to describe what you're trying to do. What are you going to write in that box? Like that is where now everything is moved. And so let's ask, what does a prompt mean? A prompt means action. It means to direct. And so like that piece is where like that's where the puck has moved. Like that's where everybody should be sort of developing their skills, is understanding what they write into that box. And then how do you make what you write into that box better? Like it's not just type words into it. There's actually an art, or I'm going to call it an art yet. There's a process. There's probably things you can, like, as a teacher, you could probably unpack this sort of like the act of writing in that box. There's probably a framework. There's probably 3 to 5 considerations about, intention, description, methodology, like what makes that space really good. And I don't want to call it prompt engineering, but like there is an action happening there. And the reality is that's not the first thing you're going to do after you've rendered whatever code. You're going to need to go back in, and there's a whole other piece to the process, presumably, where you're actually iterating and you're testing and you're putting in front of other people and you're getting signal back and then you're rewriting it. Like there is still a an experience, like a process happening that people need to understand. It's just kind of shifted. Like if I sit down in front of a landscape and I have a canvas and I'm going to paint on it, or if I have a camera and it's on a tripod, like the way that I frame and take that picture between those two different mediums still requires an artist's eye, and I have to figure out what to put into the lens, the view, like the prompt box, and so like that piece and how you get to that, like there's all this work ahead of that.
Yeah,
That's why I
right.
said, like, go for a walk, go to a farmer's market, sit
Yeah.
with some friends, have a really nice dinner, play some music. Like all these things get us to that place. Or sit on a whiteboard and actually plan out. Like that's actually the heavy lifting and work. The film I just finished required an inordinate amount of like work ahead of time and pre-work to be able to even sort of know where to begin with these tools. It wasn't just a script. It was like blocking it out. It was like just having the idea, like thinking. Like there's a lot that has to be done to be able to be good with whether or not you're writing the code by hand or you're putting it into this prompt box. Both of those two sort of like, mediums, basically, they require all this stuff. So that stuff ahead of time has always been and continues to be really important. So that would be my advice for students, is to sort of like really meditate on what is required to get to that place. And then, yeah, you can apply that to your startup. You can apply that to your portfolio that you're building. So you can apply for a job at OpenAI or wherever, or at, ILM, wherever you want to go and hone your craft. You have to have that foundational way of thinking, point that at those goals.
Yeah, same as, for example, like a junior developer put the prompt, right? Type something in prompt and generate some code. Senior developer do the same thing, but why outcome is significant different? Because senior is more like, I've already know what I want. I just type exactly. So I even show my student how I prompt. I just type like, index like a 0 to trigger, and I wrote exactly and using like a specifically like for example, I want this item to do something, and I use the scripting code to describe it. So I write very specific versus, because I have some students just that AI is not working. Why? Because they have a hallucination. They couldn't code. And I was like, it's probably your prompt has you probably couldn't describe exactly
Right.
what.
And it's not easy to do that. Like
Yeah.
describing it is pretty challenging. I was at an event the other day and there was a panel or whatever, and there was someone talking on the panel, and I think he was a teacher like yourself, and he was talking about industrial design students, or maybe he had an agency or something, but basically a lot of junior folks had rendered out, the assignment was essentially like render a shoe, like it has these specific brief for you to figure out a next generation, some kind of product. And they did all these pictures and then they put them on the walls, and they had like thousands of different kinds of directions that people could choose. And he was saying that like the skill that you can't teach is, a 20-year veteran creative director who walks into that room with all the things on the walls, and they circle like these 3, these 5, these 2, all the rest, throw them in the garbage, go and think about these more. Like that act of being able to do that, which is not just an opinion, it's not taste. Like that comes with a lot of understanding about, and that's channeled through it, like what feels like intuition, like it becomes really important. You can't kind of teach that. And so that's the big, he said, I don't know what to do. Like that's the delta, and I don't know how to fix that. He was like, no, there's just, experience that needs to be sort of had there.
Yeah, so I think you see even text prompt, right? Senior versus junior, their description, their thought, their thinking depth different, and the outcome will be significant different. So I used to talk to my student before you are learning how to talk to computer by learning C#, right? You need to learn variable, you need to learn all the stuff. For me, I teach the coding basic foundation first. And then once they have some basic foundation they can describe, they start talking, using text prompt to start translate what they want using human language to talk to the computer. So before it was you learn computer's language in order to communicate with your computer. But now computer start learning our language, your language, start to trying to learn so computer can get your direction better to execute things for you. So it's just like you see, like it's all language, right? C# is a language, right? English is also a language. Different language is language. So it's just like we speak their language, and now they speak our language. So it's just the way communication. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's a deep kind of philosophical point, is that like it all kind of does boil down to sort of how you can articulate what's in like your experience and translate those into pixels,
Yeah, that's very interesting. So what's the one thing you still like to share that we haven't touched on yet?
Well, one thing that I would share and I haven't touched on yet. Well, I mean, maybe just what we're up to right now with the studio, So my partner and I have this studio Nerd Low, and the effort there is to work with different partners, and so they could be educators, they could be universities and colleges. We work with sort of museums and nonprofits, and then with brands and agencies. And really, it's about understanding these emerging spaces, whether they're XR, VR, AI. And so we did this for about 10 years together. We were at Facebook as we looked at the spaces. We would essentially look at them and we would learn by doing. And so we would say, let's take some kind of assignment, let's take some kind of brief or mission. And then we would go through a couple of days where we would workshop together and kind of get pointed in the right direction and learn things. And then we would build, whatever the experience or the story or the content. And so we're doing that with a bunch of different, brands and agencies and folks. And so we're always open to doing that with others.
Very interesting. So yeah, I think sometimes we, let me see if there's any opportunities. And also, if you are a listener, if you want to work with Eric, feel free to reach out. I will post like his LinkedIn information on all our podcast related links. Cool. So so that's it for this episode. Thank you for listening. We release episodes weekly. If you enjoyed this conversation, check out our other episodes on Spotify, Apple Podcast, or YouTube. Support us by giving us a follow and a 5-star rating, or subscribe to our channel and give this video a like. Thank you and see you next time.